Agojie!
Analyses and Explanations of The Woman King. The Woman King is a 2022 historical epic that serves as a powerful reclamation of narrative, placing Black women at the center of a genre traditionally dominated by Western perspectives. The film's plot follows General Naniska, leader of the Agojie, as she navigates external warfare and internal political struggle while confronting a traumatic past. The narrative cleverly intertwines the kingdom's political future with Naniska's personal journey, creating a compelling dual arc where the fate of a nation and the healing of a woman become inextricably linked. Analyses of The Woman King must begin by acknowledging its foundational tension between historical inspiration and cinematic storytelling. The film is inspired by the very real all-female warrior regiment of the Kingdom of Dahomey, but it constructs a specific moral universe for its characters. This creative choice is central to understanding the film's intent and the subsequent debates it ignited. The character of Nawi functions as the audience's entry point into the rigorous world of the Agojie. Her defiance against an arranged marriage showcases the film's theme of female agency, presenting the warrior sisterhood as a radical alternative to traditional patriarchal structures. Her journey from rebellious recruit to formidable warrior mirrors the internal transformation the film advocates for its viewers regarding perceptions of Black womanhood. General Naniska, portrayed with formidable intensity by Viola Davis, embodies the film's complex core. She is a leader burdened by collective responsibility and personal trauma. Her advocacy for Dahomey to transition from the slave trade to a palm oil economy creates the story's ethical spine, positioning her as a visionary struggling against entrenched systems of power and profit. The film's depiction of the Agojie training regimen is a masterclass in visual storytelling for character and theme development. The brutal physical conditioning, the chanting, and the weapon mastery are not just spectacle. They symbolize the forging of individual identity into collective purpose. The training sequences argue that strength is not inherent but painstakingly built, a discipline that liberates the women from societal expectations. A crucial layer of analysis involves the relationship between Niska and Nawi, which evolves from stern mentorship to revealed motherhood. This personal storyline elevates the film beyond a mere war epic. Their emotional reconciliation represents the healing of intergenerational wounds, suggesting that true strength lies in vulnerability and connection as much as in martial prowess. The political narrative with King Gizo adds significant depth. The film presents Gizo as a pragmatic ruler caught between the kingdom's economic reality and a moral future. His dynamic with Niska explores themes of counsel and power, illustrating how influence is wielded from positions outside formal throne rooms. His ultimate support of Niska symbolizes a choice of legacy over short-term gain. The film's antagonist forces, the Oyo Empire and the Portuguese slavers, represent the multifaceted threats facing Dahomey. The Oyo embody a traditional military rival, while the Europeans represent a corrosive economic and moral evil. This external conflict allows the film to stage spectacular action, while clearly defining its moral battleground. The production design and costumes of the Woman King are characters in themselves. The majesty of the palace, the earthy tones of the training grounds, and the intricate costumes visually root the story in a specific cultural and historical context, even as the narrative takes liberties. The Agojie's practical yet distinct uniforms signify their unique status, neither fully masculine nor traditionally feminine, but something entirely their own. Terence Blanchard's musical score is essential to the film's emotional landscape. The music swells in battle with traditional African chants and rhythms, grounding the action in its setting, while softer, more melodic themes underscore the moments of sisterhood and personal revelation, tying the epic scale to intimate human experience. The action choreography deserves specific analysis for its narrative purpose. The fights are brutal, visceral, and tactical, emphasizing the Agojie's skill and teamwork over superhuman prowess. Each battle has a distinct strategic goal, and the violence often carries emotional weight, particularly in scenes involving the rescue of captives. A central theme is the concept of sisterhood as a chosen family. The bonds between warriors like Niska, Amenza, and Agojie provide the film's emotional core. Their loyalty and love for one another are presented as the true source of their strength, a force more enduring than any weapon or political mandate. The film engages deeply with the concept of trauma and its legacy. Niska's past assault is not just a personal secret. It fuels her political stance against the slave trade. The film draws a clear parallel between the violation of an individual body and the violation of a continent through kidnapping and enslavement, making her mission profoundly personal and political. Analyses must contend with the film's controversial handling of history. The decision to portray the Agojie as abolitionist liberators is a significant departure from the historical record, where the Dahomey Kingdom was a major participant in the Atlantic slave trade. This is the film's most debated creative license, a choice that simplifies a morally complex history to create a more conventionally heroic narrative. From a feminist lens, the film is a groundbreaking exploration of matriarchal power structures. The Agojie represent a complete inversion of 19th-century gender norms, owning their bodies, their labor, and their lethal capabilities. Their existence within the kingdom challenges both the on-screen characters and the off-screen audience to reconceive what leadership looks like. The character of Agojie, played by Lashana Lynch, provides the heart and soul of the warrior spirit. Her mentorship of Nawi and her tragic fate serve as a catalyst for both Nawi's resolve and the film's climactic rescue mission. Her character underscores the cost of war and the personal sacrifices embedded in the pursuit of freedom. The film's ending, where Niska is crowned the Woman King, is rich with symbolic meaning. The ceremony, with its ritualistic elements, signifies a formal recognition of female authority as equal to that of the king. It represents an institutionalization of the change she fought for, suggesting that true victory is not just in battle, but in reshaping the structures of power. Critically, the film was celebrated for its technical excellence and powerhouse performances. Viola Davis's portrayal was hailed for its gravitas and raw emotional power, anchoring the film's grand scale in a deeply human performance. The direction by Gina Prince-Bythewood was praised for balancing character-driven drama with large-scale action seamlessly. The audience and scholarly debate surrounding the film's historical portrayal forms a crucial part of its legacy. While some critics accused it of historical revisionism, others defended it as a necessary myth-making for a marginalized history, arguing that all historical dramas take similar licenses to serve theme and story. The film's production story is itself a testament to perseverance. The struggle to get a big-budget film centered on dark-skinned women warriors reflects the very themes of defiance and institutional resistance present in the narrative. Its eventual greenlighting after the success of Black Panther shows a shifting, though hesitant, landscape in Hollywood. The relationship between Dahomey and the European slavers is portrayed with a clear moral condemnation. The Portuguese are depicted as duplicitous and vile, emphasizing the corrupting influence of the trade. This clear-cut villainy serves the film's thematic needs, but flattens the historical complexity of African complicity in the trade. Internally, the film explores the idea of tradition versus progress. King Gizo's court is divided between those who cling to the lucrative slave economy and those, like Naniska, who envision a different future. This conflict mirrors any society's struggle to evolve beyond profitable but immoral practices. The costuming, particularly for the Agojie, is functionally symbolic. Their minimal armor, exposed muscles, and scarred bodies are displayed not for objectification, but as a testament to their strength and history. Each scar tells a story of survival, making their bodies maps of their lived experience and resistance. The use of language in the film, primarily English with moments of fawn, is a strategic choice for accessibility. While some may critique the use of English accents, the film employs cadence and dialect to create a sense of cultural specificity, aiming to immerse rather than alienate a global audience. Nawi's arc from a headstrong girl to a disciplined warrior, who also chooses compassion, highlights the film's nuanced definition of strength. Her final act is not one of blind vengeance but of strategic rescue, showing that the highest form of power is exercised to protect and liberate others. The film's lighting and cinematography often contrast the warm, golden hues of the Dahomey community scenes with the cooler, harsher tones of the European fort and the nighttime raids. This visual language subtly reinforces the thematic dichotomy between the home they defend and the external threat they face. The psychological warfare employed by the Agojie, such as their terrifying war cries and stealth tactics, is showcased as a key component of their military success. The film emphasizes that their power stems from both physical mastery and the cultivation of an awe-inspiring, fearsome reputation. The subplot involving Malik, the mixed-race Portuguese Dahamean translator, introduces themes of identity and belonging. His character serves as a bridge between worlds and a critique of the European perspective, while his connection with Nawi suggests possibilities for alliance and understanding beyond rigid cultural divisions. Ultimately, The Woman King is a film about legacy, what stories are told, who gets to be the hero, and how a people choose to remember themselves. It actively seeks to place Black women in the pantheon of historical epic heroes, a space from which they have been conspicuously absent. The film's title itself is an oxymoron in a patriarchal world, challenging the very semantics of power. By the end of the narrative, the title is earned and embodied, redefining the term king to be inclusive of the feminine strength that literally defended the kingdom. In conclusion, analyses of The Woman King reveal it as a landmark film of spectacle and heart, a conscious work of historical fiction that prioritizes inspirational myth-making over grim factual accounting. Its greatest achievement may be its successful launch of the Agojie into the global popular imagination, ensuring these warriors will be remembered and debated, sparking essential conversations about history, representation, and the enduring power of Black women's stories. The Woman King crafts a narrative where personal liberation and national destiny are profoundly intertwined, presenting a vision of sovereignty that is both fiercely physical and deeply emotional. This analysis explores the film's layered construction of heroism, a heroism redefined through feminine strength and collective purpose. One must appreciate the cinematic language used to establish the Agojie's world, from the sun-drenched training fields to the shadowy royal court, each setting reflecting a facet of the kingdom's complex soul. The visual storytelling insists on the warrior's embodied reality, their sweat and strain making their legendary status tangible and earned rather than mythical. A crucial point of analysis lies in the film's reimagining of the historical Agojie's economic role, transforming them from enforcers of a slave-trading monarchy into the moral compass pushing for its abolition. This deliberate narrative shift is the core of the film's ethical framework, constructing a clear heroic arc from historical ambiguity. Ninisca's leadership style embodies a protective matriarchy, her strategic mind always weighing military victory against the preservation of her soldiers' lives. Her command contrasts with stereotypical, disposable army tactics, emphasizing that true power protects its own and fights for a future worth living in. The film's sound design merits close attention, where the clash of machetes, the rustle of grass during stealth maneuvers, and the solemn chants create an immersive auditory landscape. This soundscape roots the spectacle in a visceral reality, making the audience feel the physicality of every triumph and setback. Naoi's defiance is not merely adolescent rebellion, but a profound rejection of a system that commodifies women. Her journey into the Agojie represents a radical act of self-possession, choosing a life of disciplined service over one of domesticated transaction, thus reframing freedom as a product of arduous choice. King Gizo's political dilemma is portrayed with nuanced tension, showcasing a ruler who is neither purely villainous nor enlightened, but pragmatically trapped. His scenes with Ninisca crackle with the energy of a power dynamic in flux, where respect and necessity battle traditional authority. The costume design for the Agojie, functional and stripped of ornamentation compared to the court's lavish attire, visually signifies their separation from conventional societal roles. Their uniforms are armor of identity, declaring their primary allegiance to sisterhood and duty above all else. The film's treatment of trauma avoids simplistic victimhood, instead presenting Ninisca's past as a source of unyielding resolve. Her pain is metabolized into purpose, fueling her fight to prevent others from suffering similar violations, thereby linking personal healing to a broader political crusade. Agojie's character provides the vital connective tissue between Ninisca's stern authority and Naoi's raw potential. Her warmth and fierce loyalty embody the heart of the Agojie ethos, proving that warrior spirit and deep compassion are not just compatible but inextricably linked. The European characters are intentionally rendered as narrative functionaries, representing the faceless, systemic evil of the slave trade rather than nuanced antagonists. This choice focuses the dramatic conflict internally, on Dahoma's soul, rather than on a complex geopolitical exchange. The training sequences serve as a metaphor for internal transformation, where the breaking down of the individual ego is necessary for the building of a collective warrior identity. The recruit's progression mirrors the audience's own growing understanding of the discipline required for true freedom. The political subplot advocating for a palm oil economy is a clever narrative device to provide a historically plausible alternative to slavery. It frames progress as an economic innovation, challenging the fatalistic argument that the kingdom had no other choice for survival. Cinematographer Polly Morgan often frames the warriors in low-angle shots during battles, visually elevating their stature and immersing the audience in their grounded power. In quieter moments, close-ups capture the subtle exchange of glances that convey volumes about their unspoken bonds. The concept of the Woman King title itself is a narrative culmination that redefines sovereignty. It proposes a complementary model of rule where masculine and feminine authority are dual pillars, suggesting that a nation's greatest strength lies in balanced power. The film's action choreography emphasizes tactical ingenuity over brute force, showcasing the Agojie using their environment, teamwork, and psychological warfare. Their victories are triumphs of intellect and coordination, celebrating strategic sisterhood. Malik's subplot, while sometimes critiqued as a conventional narrative device, serves to externalize the kingdom's internal conflict. His outsider perspective allows for exposition on Dahoma's practices and offers a channel for critique and potential change from within a hybrid identity. The production's commitment to the actors performing their own stunts translates into a palpable authenticity on screen. Every grimace, every coordinated maneuver carries the weight of real physical exertion, blurring the line between performer and warrior. Thematic repetitions of fire and water appear throughout, symbolizing both destruction and purification. Ninisca's traumatic memory is often associated with water, while the final, transformative battles are lit with the fury of fire, charting a path from submerged pain to blazing resolution. The relationship between Amenza and Naniska explores the strength of long-standing female friendship as a foundation for governance. Their partnership shows how shared history and trust form an essential council, a private space where strategy and emotional truth are reconciled. Critiques of the film's historical simplification often overlook its conscious operation within the tradition of the historical epic, a genre built on national mythmaking. Its primary goal is effective, seeking to generate pride and spectacle, much like films about Spartan or Roman warriors. The recruitment process for the Agojie is portrayed as a rigorous meritocracy, a stark contrast to the birthright and marriage alliances that define status for other women in the kingdom. This presents a compelling argument for a society where honor is earned through deeds, not bestowed by gender or lineage. Naniska's recurring nightmares are not just personal flashbacks, but a narrative manifestation of history's haunting persistence. They visually argue that the past must be consciously confronted and vanquished, not quietly buried, for true progress to occur. The color palette of the film is a character in itself, with earthy ochres, deep greens, and royal indigos dominating, creating a visual tapestry that feels both organic and regal. This aesthetic choice grounds the film in a specific, lush geography, separating it from stereotypical, arid depictions of Africa. The weaponry, from the distinctive curved machetes to the custom flintlock pistols, is presented as an extension of the warriors' bodies. The care and skill in their use underscores the film's theme that tools, like power, are only as moral or effective as the hands that wield them. Nawi's pivotal choice to spare a defeated enemy, contrary to her training, signals the emergence of her own moral code. This moment suggests that the ultimate evolution of a warrior is the development of individual judgment, the courage to question protocol for a higher principle. The score's integration of traditional vocal harmonies with sweeping orchestral arrangements bridges the gap between cultural specificity and universal emotional resonance. The music tells its own parallel story of tradition, engaging in a dialogue with a grander narrative scale. The film's structure meticulously parallels Naniska's political battle with King Gizo and her personal battle with her past. Each council meeting debate finds its echo in a nightmare or a tense recollection, tightly braiding the public and private stakes. The portrayal of the Oyo Empire as a formidable, technologically superior foe serves to heighten the dramatic stakes and frame Dahome's struggle as one of a smaller power defiantly resisting a domineering force. This classic underdog framing enhances the narrative's inspirational pull. Set pieces like the raid on the European fortress are choreographed for geographical clarity, allowing the audience to follow the tactical plan and its improvisation. This respect for spatial logic makes the action intellectually engaging, not just visually chaotic. The dialogue often uses proverbial language, grounding the characters' motivations in a wisdom tradition that feels culturally rooted. This linguistic style elevates their conflicts from mere plot points to debates about timeless philosophical principles of honor, sacrifice, and legacy. The film explores the burden of leadership through Naniska's isolation. Her position requires emotional distance, yet the plot forces her to reconnect with her maternal heart, arguing that the most complete leader integrates authority with profound human connection. The economic argument against the slave trade is presented not just as moral, but as shrewd. Naniska and her allies frame palm oil as a sustainable, self-determined future, pitting the short-term gain of human trafficking against the long-term security of sovereign industry. The diverse body types and ages within the Agojie ranks are quietly revolutionary. The film presents strength and capability as qualities built through spirit and training, not contingent on a specific youthful or stereotypically athletic physique, broadening the visual representation of power. Rituals, from the oath-taking ceremonies to the war dances, are depicted with solemn gravity. These scenes establish the Agojie's culture as one of deep spiritual significance, where commitment is sacred and their cause is a covenant beyond mere soldiering. The film's climax resolves both the military conflict and the maternal melodrama in a single, cohesive sequence. The rescue mission becomes an act of collective motherhood, with the entire unit fighting to reclaim their stolen sisters, thus uniting Naniska's dual quests. Lighting is used symbolically. Naniska is often shown in half-light when wrestling with her past, but is fully illuminated in the sun during moments of decisive action or clarity. This visual progression charts her journey from being shadowed by history to standing openly in her truth. The relationship between the Agojie and the male soldiers of Dahomey is one of respectful, competitive coexistence. This dynamic avoids simple reversal of patriarchy tropes, instead presenting a society where different martial traditions operate in parallel for the kingdom's defense. The ending, while victorious, carries a tone of sober responsibility rather than unadulterated triumph. Niniska's ascension to woman king is a beginning, not an end, acknowledging that the harder work of building the new, just society she envisions still lies ahead. Ultimately, the film's greatest thematic thrust is the reclamation of agency. Every major character arc, Nawi's, Niniska's, even Gizo's, is about making a conscious, difficult choice to defy fate or tradition and actively shape one's own destiny and that of the nation. The controversy surrounding the historical account is, in many ways, baked into the film's ambitious design. By choosing to tell a story of abolition within a slave-trading kingdom, it intentionally creates a friction that forces conversation, ensuring the history, however fictionalized, is actively discussed. The production's ethos of hiring women and people of color in key creative roles resulted in a gaze that feels inherently respectful and intimately engaged. The depiction of the female body in combat avoids gratuitous exploitation, focusing instead on function, strength, and occasional vulnerability. The narrative purpose of the Agojie's celibacy vow is explored not as a denial of love, but as a radical dedication of one's entire being to a higher calling. It reframes sacrifice as a positive, empowering choice for community, not a punitive restriction. Through its unapologetic centering of dark-skinned Black women, the film challenges deep-seated Hollywood biases about beauty and relatability. Its commercial and critical success stands as a potent counterargument to those ingrained industry prejudices. The film uses contrast between the organic, communal life of Dahomey and the sterile, transactional spaces of the European fort to underscore its central moral dichotomy. One world is built on human connection, the other on human commodification. Niniska's final confrontation with her past assailant is less about revenge and more about symbolic erasure. Her victory severs the lingering power of that trauma, allowing her to fully step into her role as leader and mother, freed from the ghosts that haunted her. The movie operates on a mythic scale, consciously crafting a foundational legend for a contemporary audience. Its power derives from this archetypal storytelling, where characters embody ideals and struggles that resonate beyond the specific historical context. In its entirety, The Woman King is a bold exercise in speculative historical fiction. It asks what if the moral conscience of a nation resided in its most formidable female warriors, and then brings that inspiring possibility to life with formidable craft and emotional depth, leaving a lasting imprint on the landscape of epic cinema. The cinematic power of The Woman King lies in its intricate layering of personal narratives against the grand tapestry of national transformation, asserting that true sovereignty begins with the autonomy of the individual spirit. This expansive analysis delves deeper into the film's philosophical underpinnings, its aesthetic choices, and its complex position within cultural discourse. A profound thematic current examines the very nature of freedom, presented not as a static state of being, but as a continuous practice of disciplined choice and collective defense. The Agojie's rigid daily rituals construct a framework where liberty is earned through submission to a cause greater than oneself, challenging Western notions of unfettered individualism. The kingdom's geography functions as a narrative device, with the walls of the palace representing both protection and confinement, while the dense jungle beyond symbolizes the unknown realm of threat, opportunity, and moral testing. This spatial symbolism reinforces the constant negotiation between security and ethical expansion. Niniska's strategic vision extends beyond military tactics into economic statecraft, positioning her as a proto-nationalist thinker. Her advocacy for palm oil is a plea for autarky, for an economy disentangled from global systems of exploitation, making her a figure of anti-colonial thought long before the formal colonial scramble. The film's soundscape meticulously differentiates between the diegetic sounds of Dahamean life, drums, nature, communal labor, and the invasive metallic clangs associated with the European slavers. This auditory dichotomy creates an immersive cultural environment while sonically marking the corruption of external influence. Nawi's character arc embodies the Hegelian master-slave dialectic reinterpreted through a gendered lens. Her initial rebellion against being marital property leads her to a state of disciplined prowess, only to achieve a higher synthesis where she exercises power tempered by mercy and individual ethical judgment. King Gizo's court politics are a masterclass in the Baoyan of power, where every gesture, seating arrangement, and gift carries layered meaning. His deliberations showcase the immense weight of monarchy, where a single decision can condemn or save thousands, and his ultimate alignment with Nanisca signals a ruler prioritizing legacy over ledger. The material culture depicted, from the earthy pottery of the villages to the refined metals of the royal court, silently communicates a society with complex artisanal and artistic traditions. This production design counters reductive primitive stereotypes, presenting Dahomey as a civilization with its own sophisticated aesthetic and material lexicon. Trauma in the narrative is not a solitary burden, but a social wound. Nanisca's personal violation is mirrored in the kingdom's participation in the slave trade. Both represent a betrayal of the body politic. Her healing, therefore, necessitates the healing of the nation, framing leadership as a therapeutic as well as a governing act. Agojie's role as the heart of the unit is crucial in humanizing the warrior mythos. Her jokes, her fierce encouragement, and her tragic end provide the emotional stakes that abstract political causes often lack, reminding us that revolutions are fought for and by individuals with singular laughs and loves. The European antagonists are deliberately depersonalized to represent an institutional evil rather than a human one. They are avatars of the Atlantic system, their faces often obscured or shadowed, making the conflict not a personal vendetta but a civilizational clash against a faceless, profit-driven machine. The rigorous training transcends physical conditioning to become a form of ideological indoctrination and spiritual rebirth. The repetitive drills strip away former identities, rebuilding the recruits around a core ethos of sisterly loyalty and lethal purpose, a process both brutal and strangely liberating. The palm oil alternative is narratively ingenious as it leverages a real historical commodity to offer a path of moral redemption. It symbolizes a future where the kingdom's wealth grows from the land and sustainable labor, not from the fracturing of human families, providing a tangible symbol of hope. Cinematographically, the use of steady, fluid camera work during Agojie rituals contrasts with the frenetic, handheld urgency of battle. This visual rhythm teaches the audience to appreciate the calm, centered power from which their explosive violence originates, making their prowess a matter of controlled release, not uncontrolled rage. The title Woman King dissolves binary oppositions, creating a third, transcendent category of authority. It is not a queen consort but a sovereign counterpart, suggesting that the most evolved governance synthesizes traditionally gendered qualities of protection, nurture, strategy, and ferocity. Combat sequences are choreographed to highlight distinct fighting styles for different characters. Nanisca's efficient, overpowering force, Agojie's agile, blade-focused technique, and Nawi's evolving, improvisational style. This variety showcases the regiment as a versatile organism where individual specialties strengthen the collective whole. Malik's character, existing in the liminal space between two worlds, serves as a living critique of racial and cultural essentialism. His struggle for belonging highlights that identity is often a contested territory, and his moral choices prove that allegiance is a decision, not a birthright. The actor's physical transformations and stunt work contribute to a cinema of embodied performance where the body itself becomes the primary text. The visible muscle, gritted teeth, and exhaustion are not aesthetic gloss but a testament to the tangible, costly labor of warriorship. Recurring elemental motifs, earth, water, fire, are woven into the character journeys. Nawi is associated with the stubbornness of earth, Nanisca with the transformative intensity of fire and the submerged depths of water, and the Agojie collectively with the life-giving yet unforgiving power of nature itself. The deep friendship between Nanisca and Amenza models a critical support system for female leadership, one based on decades of trust where challenging words can be spoken in private. This war cabinet of two illustrates how effective governance requires spaces for unfiltered counsel and emotional vulnerability. The film's engagement with history is fundamentally mythopoeic, seeking not to document the past, but to create a foundational legend for the present. It operates in the tradition of national epics that simplify and moralize to forge a collective identity and inspire future generations. The meritocratic ethos of the Agojie presents a radical social ladder based on grit and skill. It stands in silent critique of the hereditary nobility surrounding Gizo, proposing that the most capable defenders of a state might arise from any background, selected by pure demonstrated potential. Nanisca's nightmares are cinematic renderings of historical memory, insisting that the past is not past but a visceral, recurring presence. Their resolution through action posits that historical trauma is only reconciled through active, righteous confrontation, not passive forgetting. The color theory in costume and set design is deliberate. The Agojie wear earthy tones that camouflage them with the land they defend, while the royal court displays vibrant manufactured colors, indigos, reds, signifying wealth, hierarchy, and a degree of separation from the natural world. Weapons are treated as sacred objects, extensions of the warrior's will. The care shown in cleaning and sharpening blades ritualizes violence, transforming it from barbaric act to solemn duty, a necessary sacrament for the preservation of the community. Nawi's defiance of the kill order represents the birth of a critical conscience. It shows the moment the student surpasses the doctrine of the teacher, applying the core principle of protection in a new, more nuanced way, suggesting that ethical systems must evolve to remain just. Terence Blanchard's score performs emotional synthesis, weaving traditional West African percussion and vocalizations with a classical cinematic orchestra. This fusion musically embodies the film's core ambition: to tell a specifically African story on the universal stage of the Hollywood epic. The parallel editing between political scheming in the palace and physical training in the fields reinforces the film's thesis that true power is built simultaneously in the mind and the body. Policy and prowess are two sides of the same coin of sovereignty. The Oyo are portrayed with a respect that elevates the Agojie's victory. Defeating a formidable, organized enemy is more heroic than crushing a weak one. This narrative choice grants dignity to the opposition while magnifying the scale of Dahome's achievement. The film's dialogue uses call-and-response patterns and proverbs, embedding the narrative in an oral tradition. This linguistic style presents wisdom as collective and ancestral, passed down and refined through generations, rather than emanating solely from individual genius. Naniska's isolation is the price of command, a classic exploration of the loneliness at the top. Her emotional journey back to connection through Nawi argues that sustainable leadership cannot be maintained in a vacuum of feeling. It must be rooted in love to avoid becoming merely a cold calculus. The economic debate scenes are crucial for grounding the moral argument in pragmatic reality. By having Naniska present a viable alternative, the film counters the pervasive "there was no other way" historical fallacy often used to justify moral compromise. The diverse physiques of the Agojie actively deconstruct the monolithic, hypersexualized image of the female warrior. Strength is demonstrated through action and bearing, not through conformity to a narrow aesthetic, offering a radically inclusive vision of power. Ceremonial scenes, such as the ritual before the final battle, are steeped in a spiritual gravity that anchors the violence to come in a framework of sacred purpose. These moments sacralize their mission, framing them as instruments of a higher justice, not mere soldiers. The climax's rescue mission brilliantly conflates the political and the personal. Freeing the captives is a direct blow against the slave trade, while saving Nawi fulfills Naniska's maternal redemption, proving that the most effective political acts are those fueled by profound personal love. Lighting design charts Naniska's psychological journey. She moves from being lit by the flickering, unreliable light of memory and torchlight in her traumatic recollections to standing fully in the clear, triumphant daylight of the coronation, visually mapping her path from internal darkness to enlightened authority. The dynamic with the Dahamean male army avoids simplistic gender warfare. The mutual respect, tempered by rivalry, portrays a society where martial excellence is valued regardless of its source, and defense is a shared, if competitively pursued, national project. The film's conclusion is intentionally forward-looking. The coronation is not a curtain call but a commissioning. The final shots, focusing on the new generation of recruits, transfer the narrative's energy from past triumph to future responsibility, emphasizing that the work of building a just world is perpetual. The film's core argument is for radical self-definition. Every major character, from Nawi choosing her family to Gizo choosing his legacy, engages in an act of defining themselves against the expectations of tradition, economics, or trauma, advocating for identity as an active verb. The historical controversy it ignited is perhaps an inevitable and even necessary part of its impact. By placing a glorified narrative within a morally fraught context, it forces a public reckoning with how we remember, who gets to be a hero, and the purposes to which we put our history. The collaborative authorship of the film, with women guiding key creative departments, results in a gaze that avoids the male, exoticizing lens. The portrayal of the female form, in sweat, pain, and triumph, feels owned by the subjects themselves, an authentic representation rather than an external spectacle. The vow of celibacy is reinterpreted not as a denial of sensuality, but as a channeling of eros into filial and communal love. The intense, physical bonds between the warriors showcase a redirected life force, a powerful energy dedicated wholly to the protection and love of one another and their nation. Through its resolute centering of dark-skinned, textured-haired women, the film executes a profound act of cinematic reclamation. It defiantly occupies the epic genre, asserting that these faces and bodies are not only worthy of the frame, but are the very essence of the heroic saga. The contrasting production design between the organic, communal compounds of Dahomey and the sterile, stone fortresses of the Europeans visualizes a clash of worldviews. One architecture is integrated with nature and community, the other is designed for isolation, storage, and transaction. Ninisca's final battle with General Oba is a catharsis that transcends personal vengeance. It is the ritual slaying of a specter from her past and the symbolic destruction of the predatory system he represents, clearing the ground, both personally and nationally, for a new beginning. The film consciously operates in the realm of the aspirational historical, a what could have been or what should be remembered narrative. It prioritizes effective truth, the truth of Black female strength, resilience, and leadership, over a strict adherence to factual record. In its totality, The Woman King stands as a monumental work of speculative historical fiction and cultural affirmation. It masterfully uses the tools of mainstream cinema, spectacle, star power, emotional narrative, to launch a transformative myth into the global consciousness, challenging historical narratives and expanding the very imagination of power. The Woman King is a cinematic event that invites analysis far beyond its surface narrative, functioning as a profound meditation on memory, mythmaking, and the power of reimagining the archive. Its storytelling operates on multiple registers, as rousing adventure, intimate familial drama, and a sophisticated commentary on the politics of history itself. This continued examination explores the film's deeper philosophical inquiries and its nuanced craftsmanship. A foundational aspect of the film's narrative architecture is its deliberate construction of an alternative moral universe within a historically contested space. It posits a world where the ethical imperative could have triumphed over economic determinism, using the vehicle of popular cinema to explore a counterfactual scenario of immense emotional and symbolic weight. The visual symbolism of hair and heads holds significant power throughout the film. The Agojie's shorn heads are a uniform of renunciation and equality, rejecting conventional beauty standards to embrace a functional, collective identity. This stands in stark contrast to the ornate hairstyles of the court women, visually mapping the film's central conflict between traditional roles and radical self-definition. Ninisca's leadership philosophy embodies a form of restorative justice long before the term existed. Her drive to rescue captives and abolish the slave trade is not merely strategic, but reparative, an attempt to mend the societal rupture caused by commodifying human beings, positioning her as a healer of the national soul as much as a military commander. The film's sound editing meticulously crafts an oral landscape of sovereignty. The omnipresent rhythm of Dahamean drums acts as the kingdom's heartbeat, a constant reminder of cultural vitality, while the sudden, jarring silence before an attack amplifies tension, demonstrating how sound and its absence are wielded as narrative tools. Nawi's journey interrogates the very nature of belonging. Her rejection of a forced marital home leads her to a chosen sisterhood, yet her ultimate revelation as Ninisca's daughter complicates this chosen family with bonds of blood, exploring the complex interplay between fate and choice in the formation of identity and legacy. King Gizo's performance of kingship is a study in the theater of power. His public pronouncements, grand entrances, and calculated gifts are all instruments of statecraft. His private deliberations with Ninisca, however, reveal the man beneath the crown, a ruler grappling with the terrifying responsibility of steering a civilization through an existential crossroads. The material culture on display, particularly the elaborate bas-reliefs adorning the palace walls, serves as a diegetic historical record. These artworks, depicting past kings and battles, remind both character and viewer that the present struggle is part of a long continuum, and that they, too, are shaping the images future generations will see. The film's treatment of memory is nonlinear and sensory. Ninisca's trauma is recalled not as a coherent story but as fragmented sensations: the feel of rope, the sound of water, an obscured face. This cinematographic approach authentically mirrors the nature of traumatic memory, making her subsequent integration and conquest of these fragments profoundly cathartic. Agojie's sacrificial death is narratively essential, serving as the catalyst that transforms Nawi's skill into steadfast resolve and personalizes the conflict for the entire unit. Her loss is not a cheap narrative device, but the painful cost of war, the beloved heart whose absence makes the cause unbearably real and the victory bitterly sweet. The European characters, particularly the Portuguese slaver Santo Ferreira, are rendered as avatars of a corrosive ideology. Their inhumanity is shown as a byproduct of their belief system, which reduces people to currency. This portrayal shifts the antagonist from individual villainy to a systemic, ideological evil that must be opposed on a civilizational level. The Agojie's training is a holistic curriculum in world building. Beyond combat, it instills geography, botany for medicine and poison, and strategic theory. This portrays them not as mere soldiers, but as the intellectual and practical architects of the kingdom's security, the ultimate synthesis of mind, body, and spirit in service of the state. The economic subplot involving palm oil is a masterstroke of narrative hope crafting. It provides a tangible kingdom MacGuffin, a viable objective that symbolizes a self-determined future. It represents the difficult, fertile work of building a new system, inherently less dramatic than raiding, but far more revolutionary in its long-term implications. The cinematography during the council debates uses tight two-shots and close-ups, compressing the political conflict into the space between faces. This creates an intimate, pressurized atmosphere where every flicker of doubt or resolve on Gizo's or Naniska's face carries the weight of 1,000 lives, making policy debates visually gripping. The ceremonial bestowal of the title Woman King is a ritual of ontological change. It does not make Naniska a king in a man's image, but creates a new category of authority altogether. The ritual's symbols, the specific neckpiece, the anointing, craft a new mythology of power that is feminine, earned, and equal. The film's action vocabulary is distinct from typical Hollywood fare. It emphasizes close-quarter combat, grappling, and the use of the local machete, the Adon-Gon, grounding the fights in a specific, practical style that feels born from the environment and culture, rather than adopting a generic, wire-fueled wushu aesthetic. Malik's liminality provides the narrative with a crucial internal critic and a bridge for empathy. His mixed heritage allows him to see the hypocrisy in both worlds, and his choice to aid Dahomey is a rejection of his father's corrosive values, an argument that morality can be a chosen lineage stronger than blood. The physicality of the performances, achieved through punishing preparation, lends an undeniable authenticity. When the warriors are breathless, their muscles straining, the audience believes in the sheer exhausting labor of freedom fighting, removing any glamorous sheen from violence and replacing it with gritty, honorable exertion. The film employs a sophisticated color grade that moves from the warm, golden-hour glow of the kingdom's idealized moments to the desaturated, blue-gray pallor of the slave fortress and the harsh, high-contrast shadows of the night raids. This color journey visually tracks the narrative's movement from sanctuary into the heart of moral darkness and back. The bond between Naniska and Amenza is the film's emotional anchor, a relationship built on decades of shared history that allows for absolute honesty. Amenza serves as Naniska's moral sounding board and memory keeper, the person who can speak the truth of her past to her, embodying the necessity of accountability even among allies. The movie's relationship to historical fact is perhaps best understood as an act of fabulation in the philosophical sense, a creative intervention into history to open up new possibilities for thought and identity in the present. It uses the past not as a cage but as clay, molding a story that serves contemporary needs for heroism and origin. The Agojie recruitment process is a powerful narrative of rebirth. The casting aside of civilian clothes, the shaving of heads, and the taking of new names constitute a symbolic death and rebirth, a ritual entrance into a new social order where one's value is determined solely by commitment and capability, a potent fantasy of meritocratic purity. Naniska's nightmare sequences are directed with a visceral, subjective horror. The use of extreme close-ups, distorted sounds, and disorienting camera angles puts the audience directly inside her traumatic memory, making her subsequent courage not just admirable but deeply felt, as we have viscerally experienced the terror she must overcome. The costume design for King Gizo and his court utilizes rich, imported fabrics and complex layers, signaling participation in global trade networks. The Agojie's minimalist, practical leathers, meanwhile, signal a focus on endogenous strength and a connection to the local environment, visually debating the source of the kingdom's true power. Weapon maintenance scenes are moments of quiet character development. The methodical cleaning of a blade becomes a meditative act, a conversation between warrior and tool. These scenes emphasize that their power is not innate but curated, a relationship of respect and constant upkeep, mirroring the maintenance of the body and the state. Naoi's moment of mercy is the philosophical climax of her training. It signifies that she has internalized the why of fighting, to preserve life, over the blind how of following orders. This critical thinking marks her evolution from a recruit into a true leader, one who understands that rules must sometimes be bent in service of their founding principle. Terence Blanchard's score employs leitmotifs with precision. A specific, haunting vocal theme is associated with Ninisca's trauma and the captives, while a triumphant, percussive motif heralds the Agojie in action. This musical storytelling creates subconscious emotional cues, deepening the narrative layers without a word of dialogue. The editing pattern frequently juxtaposes scenes of political discourse with scenes of physical conditioning. This parallel structure argues that the strength of the nation is built simultaneously in the rhetorical arena of the court and on the muddy training grounds, that ideology and muscle are codependent forces. The portrayal of the Oyo Empire grants them a formidable, organized majesty. Their cavalry and stature present a credible threat, which is crucial because a victory over a worthy foe is cinematically and thematically more satisfying than a victory over rabble, lending gravity to the Agojie's ultimate triumph. The script utilizes the rhetorical power of proverbs not as exotic flavor, but as the operational logic of the characters. When Ninisca or Gizo speaks in proverb, they are tapping into a deep well of ancestral wisdom, framing their immediate decisions as part of a timeless chain of reasoning and consequence. Ninisca's isolation is visually communicated through framing. She is often shown slightly separate from her own warriors, or alone in her chamber. This directorial choice physically manifests the burden of command, the necessary distance that leadership imposes, making her eventual embrace of Naoi and her tears a shattering of that lonely armor. The economic debate is refreshingly central to the plot, treating fiscal policy as a matter of life, death, and moral consequence. By dramatizing the tension between the treasury and the soul, the film elevates economic choice to the highest dramatic plane, recognizing it as the bedrock upon which empires and atrocities are built. The casting of the Agojie across a spectrum of ages, body types, and features is a powerful, nonverbal statement. It presents strength as a quality manifest in many forms, challenging monolithic beauty standards and suggesting that the spirit of a warrior is ageless and not confined to a specific physique. The pre-battle rituals involving chanting, painting, and communal focus serve a crucial psychological purpose. They transition the individual from a state of peacetime individuality to a state of collective, wartime purpose, a psychological armor as vital as physical armor, and a representation of the conscious cultivation of a warrior mindset. The climax's rescue is a narrative confluence where theme, character, and plot intersect perfectly. It is a military operation that is also a moral stand, a political statement, and a personal redemption. This multifunctional climax ensures the film's resolution satisfies on the epic, ethical, and emotional levels simultaneously. The lighting design in Ninisca's coronation scene is deliberately iconic. She is lit from the front and slightly below, casting a powerful, slightly larger-than-life shadow, a visual technique reserved for mythic figures. This lighting choice announces that we are witnessing not just a promotion, but the birth of a legend. The relationship with the male army is characterized by a competitive synergy. Their shared goal of defense allows for a rivalry that strengthens the whole, presenting a model where different martial traditions can coexist and push each other to excellence without one needing to subordinate or erase the other. The film's final moments, focusing on the new recruits training under a now legendary Naoi and Ninisca, open the story outward into a cyclical future. It suggests that the struggle is never truly over, that each generation must earn its freedom anew, and that legacy is not a monument, but a living practice taught to those who come after. At its core, the film is a monumental exercise in agency, the right to author one's own story. From Naoi writing her destiny with a machete to Ninisca rewriting the kingdom's economic story, every arc celebrates the defiant human act of choosing one's path against the weight of history, economics, or personal pain. The heated discourse around its historical framing is, in many ways, evidence of the film's cultural impact. By placing a triumphant narrative within a morally complex history, it ensured that history itself became a protagonist in the public conversation, forcing a collective engagement with memory that a strictly accurate documentary might not have sparked. The collaborative, female-led creative process resulted in a film where the female gaze is operationalized. The camera looks at the warriors with respect and solidarity, not upon them with objectification. Their strength, vulnerability, and camaraderie are presented from an internal perspective, fostering identification rather than exotic distance. The celibacy vow is recontextualized as a radical freedom from patriarchal ownership. It grants the warriors complete autonomy over their bodies and their destinies, freeing their physical and emotional energy for devotion to each other and their nation, presenting a powerful, alternative model of feminine fulfillment. By centering dark-skinned, distinctly African features, the film executes a profound aesthetic reclamation within the global epic genre. It insists that these faces are the very image of heroism, wisdom, and beauty, challenging and expanding the visual language of cinematic majesty for audiences worldwide. The contrasting architectures, the organic, communal compounds of Dahomey versus the cold, stone fortresses of the Europeans, visualize a clash of fundamental values. One design fosters community and airflow, the other facilitates confinement and extraction, making the settings themselves silent arguments for two opposing ways of being. Nanisca's final combat with Oba is choreographed as a brutal, grounding counterpoint to stylized heroics. It is messy, exhausting, and ultimately won through sheer will and a clever use of environment. This realistic approach reinforces the film's theme that true victory is hard-won, physically costly, and achieved through resilience over flair. The film operates as an act of aspirational historiography, building a usable past for audiences hungry for narratives of Black female power and sovereignty. It prioritizes emotional and symbolic resonance, asking what truths are needed now, and constructing a past that can bear and deliver those truths through the powerful medium of spectacle. In its grand totality, The Woman King transcends its genre to become a cultural artifact of immense significance. It is a meticulously crafted, emotionally charged argument for the power of narrative to heal, to inspire, and to forge new identities. It stands as a testament to the idea that sometimes the most truthful story is not the one that happened, but the one that needs to be told. The Woman King engages in a sophisticated dialogue with the epic tradition, deliberately invoking its tropes. The training montage, the wise mentor, the final battle, while subverting its central focus to elevate a narrative of Black feminine sovereignty. This analytical expansion probes the film's philosophical dimensions, its symbolic economy, and its intricate construction of meaning. A central, unspoken thesis of the film posits that history is not a fixed record, but an ongoing argument, a story continually reshaped by the needs and perspectives of the present. The film itself enters this argument, offering a corrective mythology that places agency, strategy, and moral vision in the hands of those traditionally written as victims or footnotes. The visual motif of scarring operates on multiple levels, as a record of survival, a badge of honor, and a map of personal history etched onto the body. Nanisca's scars are not hidden but displayed, transforming marks of past violation into emblems of present strength and a public testament to resilience that commands reverence rather than pity. Nanisca's political philosophy extends into the realm of international relations, as her stance against the slave trade is implicitly a rejection of entanglement with a parasitic foreign system. Her vision advocates for a form of sovereign insulation, where Dahomey's power is generated and circulated internally, through its land and people, not extracted by outsiders. The auditory landscape of the film meticulously distinguishes between communal and individual sound. The unified chants of the Agojie create a formidable collective voice, while moments of personal crisis for Nanisca or Nawi are often marked by a profound, isolating silence or the subjective amplification of breathing and heartbeat, sonically demarcating the individual from the core. Nawi's narrative trajectory deconstructs the classic hero's journey. Her call to adventure is a rejection of domestic oppression. Her trials are the brutal training. Her meeting with the goddess is her complex relationship with Nanisca, and her ultimate boon is not an object, but the integration of her fractured identity and the forging of her own ethical code. King Gizo's monarchy is portrayed as a performative institution, where his regalia, his court's rituals, and his public proclamations are essential to maintaining the social order. His private vulnerability, however, reveals the mechanics of power, showing kingship as a role that is played, a constant negotiation between the person and the symbol he must embody. The film's production design subtly charts economic and cultural influence. European goods, mirrors, guns, liquor, appear as corrosive luxuries within the court, visually representing the seductive, toxic drip-feed of dependency that the slave trade fosters, contrasting with the enduring earthborn wealth of the land and its native crafts. Memory in the film is not a linear narrative, but a haunting atmosphere. The past permeates the present as a psychological weather, a sudden chill, a flash of imagery, a triggered emotion. Niniska's triumph is her gradual learning to control this internal climate, to summon the storm of her memory on her own terms for catharsis rather than being ambushed by it. Agojie's function transcends the loyal friend archetype. She is the keeper of the regiment's spirit, the translator of its harsh doctrine into lived warmth. Her death, therefore, is not just a personal loss but a spiritual crisis for the unit, a theft of its heart that forces the remaining warriors to find that strength within themselves, to become their own inspiration. The European presence is framed as a fundamentally disembodying force. Their treatment of people as cargo is the ultimate negation of human spirit. The Agojie's mission, in opposition, is one of re-embodiment, literally carrying captives to safety, restoring them to their physical and social selves, fighting for the right of people to inhabit their own bodies fully. The Agojie training is a systematic deconstruction of fear. Recruits are subjected to controlled terrors, from surprise attacks to confined spaces, to forge a neurological response where fear becomes a signal for focus, not flight. This psychological conditioning is presented as the true core of their power, making their courage a learned, reliable skill, not a fleeting emotion. The palm oil initiative is narratively potent as a symbol of sustainable creation. Unlike the slave trade, which consumes human capital, palm oil cultivation represents a renewable, cyclical process of growth, harvest, and regrowth. It offers a metaphor for a kingdom that nurtures and harvests its resources without consuming its own moral and human foundation. Cinematographic choices during dialogue scenes between Niniska and Gizo often employ a shallow depth of field. This technique isolates them from their opulent surroundings, focusing the audience entirely on the micro-expressions of their debate, making the fate of a kingdom hinge on the subtle shift of an eye or the tightening of a jaw. The title Woman King performs a linguistic integration, resolving a cognitive dissonance. It forces language to accommodate a reality it previously had no word for, enacting at the level of semantics the very societal transformation the film narrates. The creation of a new category of power that history had not previously allowed to exist. Fight choreography consistently highlights the Agojie's use of terrain and teamwork over brute duelists. Their victories are environmental and cooperative. They use the tall grass, the tree canopy, and coordinated flanking maneuvers. This presents their prowess as an intelligent, adaptive extension of their homeland, fighting with their environment, not just within it. Malik's hybrid identity serves as a narrative checkpoint for the audience's own potential unease. His initial admiration for Dahome's strength mirrors our own, while his horror at the slave trade voices the historical critique. His arc allows the film to acknowledge its own complicated setting while ultimately championing its central heroic journey. The tangible physicality of the performances, the visible tendon strain, the realistic fatigue, creates a textural authenticity that grounds the mythic story in bodily truth. This commitment to corporeal realism makes the emotional and psychological journeys feel equally earned and unvarnished, avoiding the gloss of pure fantasy. The film's color narrative evolves from a palette of natural earth and sky tones in Dahomey to the sickly yellows and grays of the slave fort, and finally back to a cleansed, vibrant palette in the climax and coronation. This visual journey mirrors the narrative arc from purity, through moral contamination, and back to a hard-won, clarified state of grace. The Niniska-Menza relationship models a critical pillar of governance, the trusted cabinet. Menza operates as chief of staff, translator, and keeper of conscience. Their dynamic shows that effective sovereignty is not a solo performance but a duet, requiring a partner who can handle logistics, offer unvarnished truth, and hold the space for private doubt. The film's approach to history can be viewed as an exercise in affirmative fabulation. It consciously builds a story upon a historical framework not to deceive, but to affirm a possibility, the possibility of black female leadership and ethical revolution. That the actual historical record may obscure, but that the human spirit needs to believe is latent within it. The rite of passage into the Agojie is a ritual of radical equality. The stripping of personal effects, the shared haircut, and the uniform act as a great leveler, temporarily erasing the social hierarchies of the outside world to build a new hierarchy based solely on merit and will. This presents the unit as a utopian social experiment within the kingdom. Nanisca's flashbacks are filmed with a destabilizing, handheld urgency that contrasts with the composed, steady camera work of her present command. This technical distinction visually separates the chaotic terror of the past from the controlled power of her present, charting her psychological progression from victim of history to author of her current moment. Textiles and adornments serve as a silent language of status and allegiance. The European-derived lace and velvets worn by some in court signify complicity with the foreign trade, while the Agojie's leathers and the king's traditional robes woven with indigenous symbols represent a fidelity to an endogenous culture and its own sources of power. The act of maintaining weapons is shown as a form of meditation and gratitude. These quiet scenes establish a sacred relationship between the warrior and her tool, a recognition that her survival depends on this object, fostering a mindset of responsibility and reverence that is the antithesis of the careless violence of the slavers. Nawi's climactic choice to show mercy represents the synthesis of her training. It demonstrates she has mastered the physical skills but, more importantly, has developed the superior moral judgment to know when not to use them, marking her evolution from a weapon to be directed into a sovereign mind capable of directing herself. Terence Blanchard's musical architecture employs distinct melodic cells for freedom and entrapment. The themes associated with the captives and Nanisca's pain are often in minor keys with haunting vocals, while the Agojie motifs are driven by complex polyrhythms and assertive brass. Their integration in the final act symbolizes the hard-won unison of these states. The film's editorial rhythm establishes a deliberate cadence, alternating between protracted scenes of dialogue or ritual and explosive, concise bursts of action. This rhythm mirrors the life of a warrior. Long periods of preparation, discipline, and tension punctuated by brief, intense episodes of life-or-death release, training the audience in the tempo of this existence. The Oyo are afforded a dignity in their depiction that prevents the conflict from becoming a simplistic morality play. Their strength and organization make them worthy adversaries, ensuring that the Agojie's victory is a triumph of superior strategy and spirit over formidable opposition, not a foregone conclusion against a weak or evil cartoon. The use of proverbs functions as the diplomatic and philosophical currency of the culture. These crystallized pieces of wisdom allow characters to communicate complex, often critical, ideas with indirect authority, grounding political and personal disputes in the immutable weight of ancestral knowledge and shared cultural understanding. Nanisca's physical isolation within the frame is a direct manifestation of her traumatic dissociation and leadership burden. As she heals and accepts her maternal role, the cinematography gradually reintegrates her into group shots and two-shots, visually charting her reconnection to the community and to the daughter that bridges her personal and public selves. The economic debate is staged as the central dramatic conflict of the film, cleverly making fiscal policy the engine of the plot. It brilliantly dramatizes the seductive logic of moral compromise for survival and pits it against the risky, principled gamble for a different kind of future, making the audience grapple with the same impossible choice as the king. The visual diversity of the Agojie challenges the monolithic, hypersexualized Amazon stereotype. By presenting warriors of different ages, statures, and features, the film argues that the warrior spirit is a quality of character and determination, not a specific body type, offering a radically inclusive and authentic vision of a military corps. The pre-battle rituals serve a crucial neurolinguistic function. The chants and dances are not just for show. They are a form of collective programming, using rhythm and repetition to align individual nervous systems, synchronize focus, and forge a single, collective intentionality from dozens of individual minds, creating a true hive mind for combat. The rescue mission climax brilliantly satisfies multiple narrative contracts simultaneously. It is the payoff for the training sequences, skill application, the political plot, direct action against the trade, and the emotional arc, maternal salvation. This multifaceted resolution ensures the film's ending resonates as a holistic victory on every story level. The ceremonial lighting for Ninisca's coronation employs a technique akin to religious iconography. The light appears to emanate from her, or to choose her, elevating her to a mythic plane. This deliberate visual sanctification marks the moment as one of transcendent historical importance, the birth of a new archetype. The dynamic with the male army is one of respectful, parallel sovereignty. They share the goal of defense but operate in different spheres, sometimes competing, sometimes coordinating. This avoids a simplistic women better than men narrative, instead presenting a society where different forms of martial excellence can coexist and mutually strengthen the state. The film's final image of new recruits training under Nawi's watchful eye is a potent metaphor for legacy. It shows that the true victory is not in the battle won, but in the transmission of knowledge, spirit, and purpose. It presents history as a relay race, where the baton of courage and ethics is passed to the next set of hands. The overarching theme is the audacity of self-definition in the face of systems that seek to define you. Every character, from the king to the recruit, fights to author their own narrative against the scripts written by tradition, economics, trauma, or foreign pressure, making the film a grand ode to the human will as the ultimate author of history. The controversy over historical accuracy, while valid, also reveals the unequal burdens placed on narratives about marginalized peoples. The film engages in the same myth-making common to all national epics, yet its divergence from fact is scrutinized with an intensity seldom applied to similar films about, for instance, Greco-Roman or medieval European history. The female creative leadership results in a fundamental reorientation of the cinematic gaze. The camera does not linger on the body as spectacle, but on the body as instrument. The set of the shoulders, the focus in the eyes, the grip on a weapon. This perspective generates identification and respect, rather than objectification. The vow of celibacy is reframed as a strategic liberation of energy and focus. It frees the warriors from the dynastic and emotional entanglements that could compromise their duty or be used as leverage against them. It is presented not as a lack, but as a disciplined channeling of all their life force into their chosen purpose of collective defense. By centering and celebrating unmistakably African features, the film performs a revolutionary act of aesthetic normalization within global popular culture. It insists that this beauty, these faces, this hair, are the absolute standard for heroism and regality in this world, challenging and expanding the global visual vocabulary of power. The architectural contrast between the open, airy Dahomey compounds and the claustrophobic, stone slave holds visualizes two opposing philosophies of human value. One architecture facilitates community, air, light, and connection. The other is designed for storage, confinement, and the negation of humanity, making the settings themselves moral arguments. Ninisca's final fight is devoid of graceful flair. It is a grueling, close-quarter struggle of stamina, will, and pain tolerance. This directorial choice emphasizes that defeating a monster from the past is not a glorious spectacle, but a dirty, exhausting, and deeply personal ordeal that must be endured to the very last ounce of strength. The film ultimately functions as a potent work of applied hope. It uses the raw materials of a difficult history to construct a narrative engine for empowerment in the present. It asks what becomes possible if we allow ourselves to imagine our ancestors not merely as they were, but as the fullest, most heroic versions of the principles we wish to inherit. In its complete essence, The Woman King is more than a film. It is a cultural covenant. It is a promise etched in light and sound that stories of Black women can command the epic scale, that complexity can be woven into spectacle, and that the right to imagine a heroic past is a crucial step in building an empowered future. The Woman King constructs a cinematic lexicon where every gesture, color, and silence is imbued with deliberate meaning, inviting a hermeneutic reading that moves beyond narrative to explore its function as a modern mythopoetic artifact. This sustained analysis examines the film's deep structural choices and their philosophical reverberations. The film operates within a paradigm of sacred geography, where the Kingdom of Dahomey is portrayed not just as a political entity, but as a spiritual cosmos with its own center and periphery. The palace represents the ordered world, the training grounds the liminal space of transformation, and the forest and sea beyond as realms of chaos and moral threat that must be constantly engaged and pushed back. Ninisca's embodiment of authority challenges the Cartesian mind-body dualism prevalent in Western heroic archetypes. Her leadership is portrayed as a fully integrated intelligence where strategic thought, emotional intuition, and physical prowess are a unified field of action, presenting a holistic model of power that refuses to separate the intellectual from the corporeal. The auditory design creates a hierarchy of listening. The Agojie are trained to listen to the subtlest cues in their environment, a broken twig, a changed bird call, while learning to silence the internal noise of fear. This cultivates a state of hyper-attunement, framing their skill as a form of deep ecological and situational awareness, a listening that is itself a martial art. Nawi's rejection of the marriage plot is a rejection of genealogical destiny as the sole path for a woman. Her choice to join the Agojie represents an embrace of teleological destiny, a destiny based on purpose and deed rather than biological and social reproduction, offering a radical redefinition of a woman's contribution to the future of her people. King Gizo's court is depicted as a complex ecosystem of influence, where advisors, merchants, and warriors constitute different pressure systems. His navigation of this ecosystem shows monarchy as a constant act of political meteorology, reading the winds of factional interest to steer the ship of state, with Niska often representing the uncompromising North Star by which he must recalibrate his course. The film's material culture highlights a tension between autochthonous and imported signifiers of status. The use of locally woven Kent cloth and carved adornments versus European lace and mirrors becomes a visual debate about the source of cultural and political capital, with the narrative ultimately championing the self-generated over the externally acquired. Memory is framed not as a personal archive, but as a somatic possession, a ghost that inhabits the nervous system. Niska's journey is one of exorcism through action. She does not talk her trauma away, but literally fights the specter of her past, suggesting that some wounds can only be healed through a physical reenactment where the victim becomes the victorious agent. Agojie's character serves as the crucial interpreter of the Agojie code for both Nawi and the audience. She translates the regiment's austere discipline into a lived ethics of joy, loyalty, and fierce love, proving that the path of the warrior can be one of profound human fullness, not emotional austerity. Her loss is therefore the theft of that translation manual, forcing others to learn the language themselves. The European slavers are depicted as beings of pure transaction, their humanity eroded by the ledger. This portrayal makes them avatars of a modern capitalist alienation taken to its horrific extreme, presenting the slave trade not as an archaic evil, but as the logical endpoint of a worldview that reduces all value, including human life, to exchange value. The Agojie training curriculum is a comprehensive education in lateral thinking and adaptive problem-solving. Obstacle courses and surprise attacks train the mind to find multiple solutions under duress, framing the warrior as an innovative thinker whose primary weapon is a flexible, resilient cognition applied in real time to dynamic, high-stakes environments. The palm oil economy is presented narratively as a slow virtue, a long-term investment in a morally sustainable future that lacks the immediate, addictive rush of profit from the slave trade. This sets up a dramatic conflict between instant gratification and delayed reward, between the easy corruption of the present and the difficult purity of a future one may not live to see. The cinematography in moments of decision often employs a push-in shot on the character's face. This subtle movement creates a visual funnel, concentrating the audience's entire attention on the minute psychological shifts occurring behind the eyes, making the birth of a resolve or the weight of a realization a palpable, almost physical event on screen. The linguistic act of naming, bestowing the title Woman King, is shown as a world-changing performative utterance. In naming this new reality, the ceremony brings it into social and political existence, demonstrating that language does not just describe power, but has the constitutive force to create new categories of authority and social relation. Combat sequences are frequently filmed from a low angle within the melee, denying the audience a detached, omniscient view. This immersive perspective forces viewers into the sensory overwhelm of battle, the confusion, the close impacts, the limited sight lines, creating empathy through disorientation and conveying that war is not a clean chess game, but a chaotic, sensory assault. Malik's narrative role is that of the integrated stranger, a trope from epic tradition. His external perspective allows him to see the kingdom's contradictions clearly, but his choice to fight for it represents an act of faith in its better angels, modeling for the audience a path to critical engagement that does not preclude ultimate allegiance and hope. The physiological realism of the performances, The shaking hands after battle, the labored breathing, the weight of a carried comrade, serves an ethical purpose. It refuses to aestheticize war, insisting on its tangible cost in fatigue, pain, and trauma, thereby honoring the real physical sacrifice of historical defenders without romanticizing violence as a bloodless ballet. The film's chromatic arc is a journey from harmony to dissonance and back. The opening scenes use a harmonious, natural palette. The intrusion of the slave trade introduces visual dissonance, harsh contrasts, sickly tones. The resolution restores harmony, but it is a richer, more complex harmony that has integrated the knowledge of darkness, mirroring the process of individuation. The partnership between Ninisca and Amenza exemplifies the distinction between leadership and stewardship. Ninisca provides the visionary direction and ultimate authority, while Amenza manages the human and material resources to make the vision possible, illustrating that enduring power structures require both the dream and the pragmatic architecture to realize it. The film's historiographic method can be described as aspirational archaeology. It excavates the historical site of Dahomey not to catalog every artifact as found, but to reconstruct the most empowered, coherent monument that could potentially have stood there, building from the fragments a structure meant to inspire the present rather than strictly document the past. The initiation of the Agojie is a ritual of symbolic death and rebirth that severs the recruits from the temporal world of family and personal history. They enter a sacred, timeless time, the time of the regiment, where their value is measured only by their present contribution to the collective, offering a stark alternative to a society structured by inherited pasts. Ninisca's traumatic flashbacks are visualized with a destabilizing, fisheye lens effect and distorted sound, rendering them not as memories but as present-tense psychic invasions. This technique validates the phenomenological reality of trauma, where the past is not remembered but re-experienced, making her mastery over these invasions a triumph of present self over past violation. Adornment in the film is a precise semiotic system. The number of neck rings, the style of armbands, and the specific patterns of scarification communicate rank, achievement, and lineage without words. This visual language creates a society where identity and status are worn on the body as a public text, legible to all within the culture. The maintenance of weapons and gear is depicted as a daily ritual of reciprocity. The warrior cares for her tools, and in return, they perform reliably in moments of crisis. This relationship models a stewardship ethos, an understanding that the instruments of power require constant, respectful upkeep, a metaphor for the maintenance of the state and the self. Nawi's decision to spare an enemy is the moment she graduates from a soldier to a statesperson. It demonstrates an understanding of power's political dimension, that a live, humiliated enemy can be a more powerful message than a dead one, and that mercy can be a strategic tool to shape future relations, showing a grasp of the long game beyond the immediate fight. Terence Blanchard's score employs a technique of thematic inversion. The melancholy, minor key theme associated with captivity and trauma is gradually, through the film, harmonized and rhythmicized, until by the end it is subsumed into the victorious major key Agojie anthem. This musical narrative mirrors the film's core argument, that pain, when faced and fought, can be transformed into the foundation of strength. The film's pacing establishes a rhythm akin to breathing, long, deliberate inhalations during training and political debate, building tension and oxygenating the narrative, followed by short, explosive exhalations during combat, releasing the built-up pressure. This respiratory rhythm pulls the audience into a somatic experience of the warrior's cyclical existence. The depiction of the Oyo Empire grants them a cultural and military specificity that avoids Orientalist generalization. Their distinct armor, weapons, and tactics present them as a civilization with its own proud traditions, making the conflict a tragic clash between two powerful African empires, rather than a simple battle of good versus evil. The script's use of proverbs functions as a form of judicial precedent in oral culture. Characters cite these condensed wisdoms like lawyers citing case law, grounding their arguments in the authority of ancestral judgment and building a persuasive case from the accumulated jurisprudence of their people's experience. Ninisca's spatial isolation, often framed alone at the edge of the frame or in separate architectural spaces like her private chamber, visually encodes her psychological exile. Her gradual movement into shared frames with Nawi and the unit maps her reintegration into the human community, charting a geographic journey back from the island of her trauma to the mainland of connection. The economic debate is masterfully rendered as a thriller of ideas. The stakes are existential, the arguments are compelling on both sides, and the outcome is uncertain. By making fiscal policy the film's central suspense mechanism, it elevates economic choice to the level of epic drama, recognizing it as the hidden engine that drives empires and atrocities alike. The casting of the Agojie across a spectrum of physical types performs a quiet but radical deconstruction of the male gaze action heroine. Their strength is communicated through posture, gaze, and action, not through conformity to a sexualized physique, expanding the visual representation of the powerful female body in mainstream cinema. The pre-battle rituals are depicted as a collective neurological hack. The synchronized chanting, stomping, and breathing likely induce a mild, shared state of trance or flow state, aligning heart rates and focus. This portrays their preparation as a sophisticated biotechnology of group cohesion, turning a collection of individuals into a single, purpose-driven organism. The climactic rescue mission is narratively overdetermined, satisfying the demands of multiple genres at once. It is a heist film, The Meticulous Plan, a war film, The Large-Scale Battle, and a family melodrama, The Mother-Daughter Salvation. This generic layering ensures the climax delivers a compounded emotional and visceral payoff to a broad audience. The lighting in the coronation scene employs a technique called chiaroscuro, where strong contrasts between light and shadow sculpt the subject. This style, reminiscent of Renaissance paintings of monarchs and saints, consciously places Ninisca within a venerable iconographic tradition of leadership, sanctifying her authority through historical visual association. The relationship with the male army is one of functional specialization rather than hierarchy. The Agojie excel at stealth, precision raids, and close-quarter protection, the male army at open-field warfare and cavalry. This presents a model of complementary, domain-specific excellence, where the whole defense apparatus is stronger because of its diversified tactical portfolio. The final shot of new recruits is a powerful metonymic conclusion. The single image of determined new faces stands in for the endless cycle of training, fighting, and teaching. It suggests that the true kingdom is not the land or the palace, but this perpetual, living chain of knowledge and spirit being passed on, making the nation itself a verb, not a noun. The film's ultimate argument is for the sovereignty of imagination over the tyranny of fact. It asserts that the right to envision your ancestors as giants, as moral pioneers, as kings and queens of their own destiny, is a necessary act of spiritual and political self-defense for communities whose historical narratives have been dominated by stories of their subjugation. The discourse on historical accuracy, while important, often misses the film's operation within the genre of the invented tradition. Like many national epics, it creates a foundational myth for a community, in this case a global community seeking empowering narratives of Black womanhood, using the raw materials of history to build a structure for contemporary identity. The female cinematographic gaze results in a tactile intimacy with struggle. The camera does not shy from the mud on the face, the strain in the neck, the bloody knuckles. This unglamorous proximity fosters a profound respect for the labor of heroism, presenting it as work, glorious and necessary work, but work nonetheless, demystifying while simultaneously elevating it. The celibacy vow is reimagined as a radical freedom from biological determinism. It releases the warriors from the societal scripts of motherhood and wifehood, not as a rejection of those paths, but as a claim to an alternative, equally valid destiny defined by martial sisterhood and service to the nation-state as one's primary familial commitment. By centering and aestheticizing specifically West African features, body types, and hairstyles, the film executes a decisive act of cultural repositioning. It moves these attributes from the marginal ethnographic detail to the central default setting of beauty, strength, and nobility within its cinematic universe, challenging hegemonic global beauty standards. The architectural dichotomy embodies two modes of relating to the human body. Dahome's open architecture allows bodies to move, gather, and breathe freely. The European fort architecture is designed to constrain, stack, and commodify bodies. The settings themselves are thus philosophical arguments about human dignity made manifest in wood, stone, and thatch. Ninisca's final combat is choreographed as a brutal, grappling struggle of endurance. It avoids the elegant, balletic violence often assigned to female action heroes. This choice grounds her victory in gritty, determined survivorship, the kind of strength that outlasts rather than outflourishes, a associating her triumph with resilience and sheer will over aestheticized skill. The film functions as a profound act of anachronistic ethics, importing contemporary moral frameworks onto a historical context to create a dialogue between past and present. It asks not only what was, but what should have been, using the past as a canvas to project our current aspirations for justice, creating a feedback loop between history and desire. In its totality, The Woman King stands as a monumental act of cinematic alchemy. It transmutes the base metals of a conflicted, painful history into the gold of an empowering myth. It is a film that understands that sometimes the most truthful history is not the one that happened, but the one that gives a people the strength to shape what happens next. The film's narrative economy brilliantly utilizes the concept of the body as territory, with each character's physical journey mapping a distinct political claim. Naniska's body, marked by trauma and strength, becomes sovereign land reclaimed. Nawi's body transitions from betrothed property to a vehicle of state power, and the collective body of the Agojie forms a living, moving border that defends the kingdom's moral and physical frontiers, making anatomy itself a site of geopolitical struggle. A sophisticated philosophical thread examines the tension between destiny and discipline within the Agojie ethos. While their initiation suggests a fated calling for those who resist societal norms, their daily existence is a brutal testament to the absolute primacy of disciplined practice over innate gift. This frames their legendary status not as a product of mysterious essence, but as the observable outcome of repetitive, grueling work, offering a materialist critique of the born warrior, mythos prevalent in heroic fiction. The film's soundscape meticulously engineers a sonic hierarchy that mirrors its social structure. The deep, fundamental frequencies of the royal drums represent the kingdom's enduring pulse, the mid-range harmonies of the working chants signify collective labor, and the high, piercing war cries of the Agojie function as a disruptive, galvanizing force cutting through the auditory field. This layered composition sonically positions the warriors as both a product of their culture and a transformative element within its acoustic signature. King Gizo's performance of power is revealed to be a delicate negotiation between two temporalities: the cyclical time of tradition and ritual, and the linear, irreversible time of historical crisis and economic change. His arc demonstrates how monarchy, often portrayed as static, must in fact become a fluid interpreter of time itself, reading when to invoke the eternal past for stability and when to pivot decisively toward an unprecedented future, with Naniska often acting as the relentless voice of the linear and new. The film's resolution, achieved through the synthesis of maternal love and military stratagem, proposes a radical redefinition of victory. Triumph is not measured solely in the defeat of an enemy army, but in the successful execution of a rescue that heals a personal and national rupture. This recenters the epic's conclusion away from territorial conquest and toward the restoration of community, framing the highest purpose of power as the capacity to retrieve, protect, and reunite that which has been violently scattered and stolen.